Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we are looking at white box testing.
White box testing.
You gave us a bunch of stuff to read about it, and now we're going to tell you all about it.
That's right.
White box testing. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking,
yeah,
what is it? It's like
I've heard of black box testing.
Black box testing, right?
Yeah.
But white box.
That's the difference.
So black box testing, you're basically just testing the inputs and outputs.
Exactly.
So you're not really looking at the code itself.
You don't care about the code.
You just care if you put in this input.
Right.
You get out this output.
It's like using an app.
Right.
You don't know how it works.
You don't care?
As long as it does what it's supposed to.
Exactly. But white box testing.
Yeah.
You're getting in there.
You're getting under the hood.
You're like, all right, let's look at this code.
Let's see what's going on in here.
What's going on under the hood? Let's look at each individual part.
Right.
And so that's what this is all about. And you might be listening to this because you're like,
why would you care?
yeah, why do I care? I'm not a software developer. Or you might be a software developer and you're like, oh, yeah.
I need to brush up on this.
I got to make sure I'm doing this right.
Yeah.
Or maybe you're just curious.
Or maybe you're just listening for fun.
Yeah, maybe you're like, I just like to know
That's great.
how things work.
That's awesome.
Whatever your reason.
Yeah.
We're glad you're here, and we're going to dive into it.
We are.
So we're going to talk about 5 different specific techniques
5 core techniques.
for white box testing that we learned about from all this material.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And the cool thing is this material actually uses a lot of
Yeah.
like real world examples. Analogies, yeah.
So even if you're not
To help understand these things.
a programmer, you can still get it.
Yeah. So even if you're not a coder, you can still understand what we're talking about.
Exactly.
Which is great. So, okay, but before we get into all of that,
Yeah.
why would you even do white box testing? Like,
What's a bother?
what's the point? I mean, if the software works,
Right.
if it does what it's supposed to do,
Who cares?
then what do you care?
Right.
What's the point of going in there and looking at every
Well, see,
little line of code?
can be very sneaky.
Okay.
You might have code that looks like it works.
Yeah.
It passes your black box tests.
Okay.
But deep down inside,
Okay.
there's a bug hiding, just waiting to rear its ugly head.
Like a ticking time bomb.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's where white box testing comes in.
Okay.
It helps you catch those hidden bugs
Right.
before they cause problems.
Before they blow up in your face.
Exactly.
Okay. That makes sense.
So you don't want to wait until your app crashes in the hands of millions of users.
No.
You want to find those bugs early.
Right.
When they're still easy to fix.
Makes sense. Okay. So let's go into these techniques.
Let's do it.
First one, statement coverage.
Statement coverage.
This one, the source material compares it to reading every single word
Like a lawyer.
in a contract. Yeah.
Scrutinizing every clause.
So you're not just like skimming it
Right.
to get the gist. You're reading every single word.
You're making sure you understand every single line of code.
So why is that important? Like what kind of bugs?
Well, imagine you're buying a house
Okay.
and you skip over a line in the contract
Uh-oh.
that says the seller gets to keep the swimming pool.
Oh, I want that pool.
Right. That's a big problem.
Yeah.
Same thing with code.
Okay.
If you don't test every line,
Yeah.
you might miss something crucial.
Okay, so give me an example. Like what kind of code are we talking about here?
Sure. Let's say you have a simple function
Okay.
that adds an item to a shopping cart.
Okay, yeah.
Something like
a website?
Yeah, an e-commerce site.
Okay.
And the code looks like this.
Okay.
Add to cart, item, quantity,
Okay.
colon, if quantity is greater than 0. Then cart dot append item,
Okay.
else print invalid quantity.
Okay. So that's the code.
That's a simplified example.
Yeah, okay.
But it illustrates the point.
Okay, so with statement coverage,
Yeah.
what we're doing is we want to make sure
You got it.
that every single one of those lines of code actually gets executed
Executed at least once.
when we run our tests.
Exactly.
So in this case, we would need to test
2 things.
adding an item to the cart
With a valid quantity.
with a quantity greater than 0.
Right.
And then we'd also have to test adding an item with
An invalid quantity.
an invalid quantity, like
Yeah.
0 or less than 0.
Exactly.
Okay, so that would ensure that both of those lines of code,
Both the if block
yeah,
and the else block
the if block and the else block actually get run.
get executed.
when we're
right?
testing.
That's statement coverage.
All right, that makes sense. All right, so what's the next technique?
The next one is branch coverage.
Branch coverage. Okay.
This one.
And the source compares this to,
Think of your GPS.
checking both routes on your GPS
Right.
to see which one's faster.
You want to see all the possible paths.
Yeah, okay, so
And check for traffic.
so we're not just looking at every single line of code.
Right.
We're looking at
The decision points.
the decisions, the branches,
The forks in the road.
the forks in the road. Okay,
Yeah,
so
sure.
like give me an example.
So let's say you have a login system for a website.
Okay, yeah.
You want to test both successful logins,
Right.
where you enter the correct username and password,
Right.
and unsuccessful logins,
Where you mess up.
where you enter the wrong credentials.
Yeah.
So you're testing both branches,
Okay.
the branch where the login succeeds,
Okay.
and the branch where it fails.
Okay, so
Human
that's
reading.
branch coverage. Going back to our add to cart example,
Yes.
would we be doing the same thing with branch coverage as we did with statement coverage?
So in that simple example,
Yeah.
yes, branch coverage and statement coverage would be the same.
Okay, but it's not always the same.
In more complex scenarios, they can be different.
Okay, so like what would be a more complex scenario where it would be different?
So imagine that add to cart function also checks if the item is in stock
Okay.
before adding it to the cart.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So now you have two conditions to consider,
Okay.
the quantity and the stock availability. So
Right.
you'd need to test
All the combinations.
all four possible combinations.
So like in stock and the right quantity.
right.
Out of stock and the right quantity.
Yeah, but
In stock and the wrong quantity. And out of stock and the wrong quantity.
you got it.
Wow.
It's
Okay.
branch coverage.
That's a lot more than just the statement coverage.
Exactly.
So you're really testing all the different possibilities.
All the different paths.
Okay. So that brings us to path coverage,
Path covered.
which the source compares to
Imagine a hiker
like a hiker in a park.
exploring every single trail.
Yeah. And like meticulously mapping it out.
Right, leaving no stone unturned.
So they want to know every single possible path they could take.
Every possible route through the code.
Okay. And why is that important?
Because sometimes bugs only show up
Yeah.
in very specific combinations of conditions.
Oh.
If you only test a few paths,
Yeah.
you might miss those bugs.
Okay. So like in our add to cart example,
Yes.
if we added in that thing where it checks if it's in stock,
Right.
and then also maybe like there's a discount
Oh, yeah.
if you buy a certain amount,
Multiple conditions.
that would be a lot more paths to test.
Exactly. You'd have to test adding an item that's in stock
Okay.
with a discount.
Yeah.
Adding an item that's out of stock
Right.
without a discount.
Right.
And so on.
And so on, all the possible combinations.
That's path coverage.
And that sounds pretty
Pretty complex.
intense. Yeah, like that's a lot.
Especially for large applications.
Yeah, but it's important.
But it's crucial for finding those hidden bugs.
All right, and this is making me think about those choose your own adventure books
Oh, yeah.
I used to read as a kid,
I loved those.
where you like get to a point in the story and it's like,
Do you go left or right?
yeah, if you want to go left, turn to page 20.
Exactly.
If you want to go right, turn to page 30.
And you make different choices,
Yeah, I'm like,
leading to different outcomes.
I was basically path testing my way through those stories.
That's a great way to think about it.
Yeah, I never realized that.
You were a tester all along.
That's hilarious. All right, so next technique,
Condition coverage.
condition coverage.
Now this one.
And they compare this one to
It's like examining each ingredient
like a recipe.
in a recipe
Yeah.
before you start cooking.
So we're not looking at the whole path anymore.
Right.
We're zooming in on each part.
Each individual condition
There's decision.
within a decision.
Okay, so give me an example.
Okay, let's say you have a condition like
Okay.
age is greater than 18
Okay.
and has driver's license.
Okay, to drive a car.
To drive a car
Yeah.
with condition coverage. You would need to test cases where
Yeah.
the age is greater than 18, but they don't have a license,
Okay.
and cases where they have a license,
Yeah.
but they're not over 18.
Right. So you're testing each part of that condition.
Each part independently
Yeah.
to make sure it's working correctly.
Okay, that makes sense.
You don't want to assume that just because one part is true,
Right.
the whole condition is true.
Right. You got to test each little piece to
Exactly.
make sure it's all working.
Condition coverage.
Okay. And then finally we have loop testing,
Ah, loop testing.
which seems pretty straightforward.
Seems simple.
Yeah, it's like just making sure that your code can handle doing something over and over again.
Loops, iterations.
Yeah, so why is that important?
Well, imagine a bridge
Okay.
that can only handle a few cars at a time.
Oh,
What happens when rush hour hits?
it's going to collapse.
Exactly. It could collapse under the stress.
Okay.
Same with code.
Okay.
You need to make sure your loops can handle
Lots of data.
a wide range of inputs.
Okay.
From 0 iterations to 1 million iterations.
Wow, okay.
And everything in between.
So like in our add to cart example,
Yes.
if we had a loop
Right.
that added like a bunch of items to the cart at once,
A list of items.
yeah, we'd have to test it.
With an empty list.
With an empty list.
With one item.
With one item, and then with like...
And with a huge list.
That's a huge list to make sure that it doesn't break.
To make sure it can handle the load.
Okay, that makes sense.
That's loop testing.
So those are the 5 techniques.
5 key techniques.
For a white box test.
For white box testing.
And I got to say, like, I'm starting to see how each one of those techniques is like adding another layer of
scrutiny.
Like looking at the code through a different lens.
It's like a detective.
Yeah.
Examining every clue.
Yeah, to make sure that you're really getting the full picture.
To make sure the software is truly robust.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, we want software that works, that does what it's supposed to do.
Reliably.
Doesn't break.
Without hidden surprises.
Yeah, and white box testing seems like it's a
powerful tool.
Yeah, it's a powerful tool to make sure that actually happens.
Absolutely.
But here's a thought, right?
Yeah.
Like all these techniques.
They all involve a systematic approach.
Thinking really critically.
To problem solving.
Yeah, like thinking about all the possibilities.
All the different paths.
All the different conditions.
The conditions?
Do you think that kind of thinking...
That's a great question.
Could be applied to other things?
I think so.
Besides software?
I think it can be applied to life in general.
Okay, so like what would be an example?
Well, let's say you're trying to decide what career path to take.
Okay, yeah.
You could use path coverage
to
explore all the different options, all the different paths you could take, and then use condition coverage to analyze the factors that are important to you, like salary, work-life balance, location, your interests, and then make a decision based on
all of that information.
A thorough analysis of all the variables.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
It's about thinking systematically.
So you're not just like going in blind.
Exactly.
You're actually taking the time to think about all the possibilities.
To really understand the problem.
And all the different paths you could take.
And make an informed decision.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So yeah, I think these techniques can be applied beyond software.
That's a great takeaway.
Yeah.
That's a great takeaway. So
just to think about it.
Yeah, think about how you can use this kind of thinking.
In your own life.
In your own life, your own decisions.
Absolutely.
All right, well that is our deep dive.
Deep dive.
On white box testing.
White box testing.
Hopefully you learned a lot.
I hope so.
Hopefully it wasn't too confusing.
We tried to make it clear.
Yeah, we tried to make
as clear as
as clear as possible.
Right.
And yeah, see you next time for another deep dive.
Until next time, happy testing.